This week, Honda announced a new bike for India, the awesome-looking CB350 Highness. Their intention is pretty clear: to go after some of Royal Enfield's customer base in the more premium end of the market in India. But it's such a great-looking retro bike that I'd love to see something like it available in the UK, even if that's a long shot. So in today's video, we're going to go over the specs of this new bike and see which is the best, this or the upcoming Enfield Meteor 350. But before we get started, if you're new here and you want to see more of the latest motorcycle news, releases and rumours right here on YouTube, then please do remember to hit subscribe. I'll be covering as many new bikes as possible right through the launch season as we get to see all of the new machines for 2021. Honda claimed that this new CB350 is a majestic motorcycle which is a perfect blend of advanced new world features and the classic old world charm. And I'd have to agree that while the overall look of the bike is retro, there are a couple of surprising features in terms of tech. So let's take a look at the specs. It uses a 348cc fuel-injected single-cylinder engine, which is capable of just shy of 21 horsepower at 5,500 RPM and 30 Nm of peak torque at 3,000 RPM. The gearbox is 5-speed and an assist and slipper clutch is on hand for a lighter feel at the lever, as well as preventing rear-wheel lock-up on aggressive downshifts. Singles can be quite vibey, so the CB350 uses a weight on the main shaft as well as a balancer shaft to smooth things out. A 45mm diameter exhaust is used to emit a deep and bassy sound, whilst double layer headers help to prevent discoloration over time. The engine is suspended low in a duplex cradle steel frame, which Honda says helps to keep the centre of gravity low for easygoing handling. And in terms of dimensions, it's a pretty substantial machine with a seat height of 800mm and a curb weight of 181 kilograms. A 15-litre fuel tank should provide pretty good range for a 350 single. There's not a great deal of information about the suspension or brakes, just regular forks and twin shocks with nothing particularly fancy about them. The brakes look to be a 2-piston caliper at the front with a fairly large 310mm disc and a single pot at the rear on 240mm. The CB350 gets tubeless tyres with a 19-inch wheel at the front and an 18-inch at the rear, not only adding to the retro look of the bike, but also providing some extra stability over varied surfaces. Technologically, the bike is pretty well equipped given the price point. There's switchable traction control in the form of Honda's torque control tech, which will prevent the rear wheel from spinning up on less grippy surfaces. If, however, you're finding it too invasive or you fancy doing a burnout, then it can be disabled from the switchgear. Dual-channel ABS is also on hand to provide safer braking, with each wheel modulated separately as opposed to single-channel ABS. There's LED lighting all round with a particularly nice-looking headlight and ring-style indicators, and a single speedo with LCD inset provides pretty comprehensive readouts including battery voltage, gear position, a fuel gauge, current fuel consumption and distance to empty. There are two models available, the DLX and DLX Pro, with the Pro getting additional smartphone voice integration. You'll need a headset which is sold separately, but then you can control navigation, music, phone calls and messages with voice commands and the controls on the switchgear. There's also a USB-C charger tucked away under the Speedo. On top of this, the DLX Pro gets 2 horns instead of 1 and a premium twin-tone paint job. I think it sounds like a great little package, and I also love what Honda have done with the styling of this bike. It looks partly classic, partly modern, and I think they've blended the two nicely with perfect overall proportions. But with all that in mind, is it really enough to tempt loyal Enfield customers away from their favourite brand? Enfield have got their own new modern classic style bike on the horizon, the Meteor 350, and to me this looks like it'll be the closest competitor to the CB. We don't have comprehensive specs as of yet, but there's still enough information out there already to draw some reasonable comparisons. The majority of the specs look similar. It'll also use a 350 single, of course, with roughly equivalent power of 20 horsepower and a smidge less torque at 27 Nm peak. But both of these peak figures are achieved higher in the rev range with peak power at 6,100 RPM and torque at 4,000 RPM. That means that the CB produces 10% more torque at 1,000 less revs, which should make it feel more gutsy around town, although the Meteor is expected to get a 6-speed gearbox, so it could turn out to be the better pick for highway riding with potentially better fuel efficiency at cruising speeds. In terms of hardware, braking and suspension look to be similarly set up, and some of the tech is comparable too. The Enfield will also get an LED headlight, although not the taillight and indicators, and there'll be dual-channel ABS on the Meteor, as well as Bluetooth phone connectivity for some of the same features as the DLX Pro edition of the CB350. Where the Enfield might not be able to compete though is with the traction control feature on the Honda. It's thought to be the only bike in the segment with this capability, but whether it's truly necessary on a bike with 20 horsepower really depends on your riding style and the conditions that you tend to go out in. Slippy surfaces and bad weather could make it a more desirable feature, but you'll need to pay a premium. The CB350 will cost 185,000 rupees for the DLX and 190,000 for the Pro, which is equivalent to about £2,000 in pounds sterling. The Meteor 350 is expected to start at around 175,000 rupees, which is just over 1,800 quid, and that might be enough of a saving to tempt buyers towards the Enfield. And there's also the 350 Classic to consider, a more old school bike, but at 160,000 rupees or just under 1,700 quid, it's easily the most affordable of the bunch. Personally, I think the Honda is the best looking of the two bikes, with the overall lines and proportions just looking that bit sharper and more aggressive. And it looks like a couple of more sporty models might be in the works too. Visor Down report, the Indian automotive website Gadiwadi report that Honda are working on more variants of the 350 in order to compete with Enfield's much more comprehensive lineup, including an RS version or a cafe racer. There's not much meat on the bones of this rumour, but almost all manufacturers spin out multiple versions of the same platform nowadays as an efficient means of appealing to a wider customer base. Just look at the number of Triumphs on sale based upon the Bonneville twin. So I see no reason why Honda wouldn't do the same if the CB350 is a success in India, and I reckon a cafe racer version would look super cool. Like I said at the top of the video, I'd love to see a small, affordable bike like this available on the market in the UK, even though it seems unlikely. It's such a nicely proportioned bike with classic lines that it would make a great platform for customization, especially if it doesn't cost an arm and a leg. Stick some knobblies on it and some higher, wider bars and it'd make a nice looking small capacity scrambler, for example. But let me know what you think of the new CB350 Highness in the comments below. Is it worth the extra cash for the styling, torque and traction control? Or does the Enfield look like a better bet with its 6-speed gearbox and lower pricing? Let me know which you'd pick in the comments below, and if you're new here and you want to see more videos like this, hit subscribe and I'll catch you next time.